Ah, my dear, if you've stumbled upon my voice tonight, it's no accident. Fate brought you here. Sit closer. Lean in, because what I'm about to tell you is not just a story. It's my life, and it's a story soaked with humiliation, betrayal, secrets, and finally, a shocking revenge that nobody saw coming. People always think old age makes us weak, forgetful, useless. But oh, how wrong they were about me. They mocked me for being old, for being slow, for having wrinkled hands that once stitched clothes and cooked meals. They laughed at me, thinking I had nothing left to offer, that I was just a burden in this grand English house. But what they never knew is that every night, while they were snoring in their feathered beds, I was holding on to a secret so powerful, so devastating, that when it finally came to light, it left them speechless. But let me not rush ahead. You need to feel it as I felt it. You need to walk with me through those creaking corridors of my old house, hear the whispers, see the sneers, and taste the bitter tears I swallowed when no one was watching. Only then will you understand the sweetness of what was to come. And oh, before we step deeper into this tale, my dear listener, if you're here with me, if you're still listening to the trembling voice of an old woman, do me a kindness. Tap that subscribe button, share my story with someone who might need strength, and leave me a comment telling me if you've ever been underestimated. Because in this world, we old ones are often silenced, but together, we can make our voices echo. Now, let me take you back. The house was an old Georgian beauty, standing proudly on the corner of a quiet English street, red bricks weathered by centuries, tall windows that reflected the grey skies, and ivy climbing stubbornly up the sides, as if trying to hold the walls together. Inside, the air always smelled faintly of lavender polish and burning firewood. It had been my sanctuary for decades, the place where I raised my children, where I laughed with my husband before the cruel hand of death snatched him from me, and where I thought I'd spend my final days in peace. But peace is a fragile thing, isn't it? One mocking word, one sneer, and the walls you built around your heart can crumble. It began subtly. My son, Charles, and his wife, Margaret, had moved in with me after convincing me it would be best for everyone. Oh, how gently Charles had spoken, his words dripping with fake concern. Mother, you shouldn't be alone in such a big house. Let us help you. Let us take care of you. And silly me, blinded by love, agreed. I opened my doors to them, thinking my twilight years would be warmed by the laughter of family. But instead of laughter, I was met with ridicule. Margaret. Ah, Margaret. She had eyes as sharp as daggers, and a tongue to match. At first, she masked her disdain with smiles, but soon her true feelings spilled out. You're too slow, Mother, she'd say, as I tried to chop vegetables in the kitchen. Why don't you sit down and let me handle it? You'll just make a mess. She'd laugh, loud enough for the children to hear, and they too would giggle, thinking it funny to mock old Gran. Once, as I tried to carry laundry up the stairs, she smirked and whispered to Charles, Look at her. She moves like a ghost haunting her own house. They thought I didn't hear, but I did. Oh, I always heard. And then came the day that broke something inside me. It was a Sunday afternoon. The rain was tapping on the windows. The fire was crackling, and I had just finished knitting a small cardigan for my youngest grandchild, Emily. My fingers had worked for weeks on that piece, every stitch carrying my love. When I shyly presented it to Emily, her eyes lit up, but Margaret snatched it away. Oh, Mother, this is outdated. She can't wear this. People will laugh at her. We'll buy something proper from town. And she tossed it aside like rubbish. I saw Emily's smile fade, and I felt my heart shatter. Do you know what it feels like to become invisible in your own home? To have your love treated like trash? It's a pain deeper than death. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, I made a promise to myself. If they thought me useless, if they thought me a frail old fool, then I would let them believe it. For now, I would play their game, but someday I would show them who I truly was. And oh, when that day came, their sneers would freeze upon their faces. Let me tell you a secret, dear listener. Never underestimate an old woman. We have lived through wars, through deaths, through betrayals. We have buried our loved ones, rebuilt our homes, and stitched our broken hearts over and over again. We carry more strength than the young can ever imagine. And me, I carried something else too. For years I had been hiding a secret. While they mocked me for being old, for having no worth, I was quietly guarding something they could never dream of. A secret bank account. Yes, hidden away, untouched, known only to me. It wasn't just a few pounds. Oh no, it was a fortune I had carefully built with my late husband. Every penny saved from his business, every investment we made, every little inheritance that came my way, all of it tucked away in silence. They thought I was poor, dependent on their charity. But in truth, I could have bought and sold every one of them, but I kept it hidden. Why? Because power means nothing until the right moment comes to wield it. And when that moment arrived, I wanted it to be unforgettable. The cruelty didn't stop. Weeks turned into months, and their mockery grew bolder. Margaret began inviting her friends over, showing off the house as if it were hers. Oh yes, this old place. We're fixing it up, making it livable again. She'd laugh, her friends chuckling in agreement. I'd stand silently in the corner, my hands trembling, but not from weakness, from rage. They'd sip their wine, ignoring me, sometimes even speaking as though I weren't there at all. Once, one of her friends asked, "Does she always just sit there like a statue?" And Margaret replied, "Yes, but she's harmless. She doesn't even know what's going on half the time. Harmless, invisible, worthless." But oh my dear listener, if only they knew that while they mocked me, I was writing letters, visiting the bank in secret, and preparing documents that would change everything. I had friends still. Quiet, loyal friends who knew my truth. I wasn't as alone as they thought. And then came the twist of fate, the storm that ripped through the fragile glass of their arrogance. It was Emily again. Sweet, innocent Emily. One evening, she crept into my room, her eyes wide with tears. "Gran," she whispered, "Mummy said you're useless, but I don't think you are. I love you." She wrapped her tiny arms around me, and I broke. I wept into her little shoulder, holding her so tightly that she squeaked. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't just endure this cruelty anymore. I had to act, not for me, but for Emily, for her to see that age is not weakness, that being old does not mean being powerless. So I began weaving my plan. Now, my dear, before I tell you what I did, let me pause and ask you something. If you're still here, if my story is still echoing in your heart, please leave me a comment. Tell me, have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever been mocked for something you couldn't change, like your age, or your background, or your struggles? I want to know, because your story matters as much as mine. And don't forget to like this video. It may seem like a small thing, but it keeps my voice alive. It keeps me telling stories that the world tries to silence. Now listen carefully, because the night of reckoning was drawing near, and oh, how sweet it would be. The night Emily hugged me, I could not sleep. My bones ached, but it was not from age. It was from the fire burning inside me. I sat upright in my bed, staring at the moonlight spilling through the tall, narrow window, and I whispered to myself, "It ends now." You see, dear listener, people think that when we grow old, we lose our strength. But we don't. We only learn patience. We wait, and sometimes we wait so long that the world forgets we are still watching, still calculating. That is when we strike. I began with small moves. The next morning, I let Margaret scold me for leaving my teacup on the table. I lowered my eyes, nodding meekly, just as she liked. Charles glanced at me with pity, but it wasn't pity for me. It was pity for himself. He saw me as a weight on his shoulders, a reminder that he'd someday grow old too. That's why he sided with her. That's why he let her mock me. He was afraid to see himself in me, and that fear turned into cruelty. But while they laughed at me, I began slipping away for little walks. They thought I was wandering aimlessly, that I was losing my mind. Margaret even joked once, "Careful, mother, don't get lost on your way back from the postbox." Her friends cackled, their sharp voices cutting through the air like glass. I smiled faintly, nodded, and shuffled out the door. But where was I really going? To the bank. Ah, that grand old building in town, with its cold marble steps and tall wooden doors. I had walked those steps for decades, always unseen, always unnoticed. Inside, the manager still remembered me, though he looked at me with surprise. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, lowering his voice. "It's been a long time." I smiled, leaning on my cane. "Yes, but some treasures must be checked on now and then." He led me to a quiet room, far from the bustling clerks, and I pulled out the documents. Oh, how his eyes widened when he read the figures. He glanced up at me with respect, the respect my own family denied me. "Do you wish to move the funds, madam?" he asked. "No," I whispered. "Not yet, but prepare them. When I give the word, I want everything ready, discreetly." He nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. Discretion is our finest service." I left that bank with my heart pounding. It was like carrying a thunderstorm in my chest. They thought me weak, but I had the power of a queen in my hands. If I wanted, I could sell the house tomorrow, buy 10 more like it, and send them all packing. But no, revenge must be slow, deliberate, and unforgettable. The days passed, and I watched them grow bolder. Margaret began throwing parties in the house, parading her friends through the drawing room, boasting about our property. She even had the audacity to move some of my old portraits to the attic, saying they made the house look dreary. Dreary! Those were the faces of my ancestors, the ones who built this very home with their sweat and blood. I climbed into the attic one night, tears in my eyes, running my fingers over the dusty frames. I promised them silently, "They will pay for this insult. I will not let them erase us." And then, my dear listener, fate handed me the perfect stage. One afternoon, Margaret announced at dinner, "We're hosting a large gathering next month. Business partners, friends, important people. Everything has to be perfect." Charles nodded in agreement, though his eyes darted nervously to me. He knew I would be an embarrassment in her eyes. Sure enough, Margaret smirked and said, "Mother, you can join us, but perhaps stay in the background. We wouldn't want the guests to feel uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. Because of me, the woman who raised the man she married. The woman who owned the very walls around her." I smiled faintly and whispered, "Of course, dear. I wouldn't want to spoil your evening." But in my heart, I was already planning. That night, I sat by the fire with Emily, who had sneaked in again, and I whispered to her, "Would you like to see something magical, my darling?" Her eyes sparkled as she nodded. I pulled out an old wooden box from beneath the floorboard, one I had hidden long ago. Inside were letters, bonds, receipts, little fragments of the fortune I had built. Emily gasped. "Gran, are you rich?" she whispered. I pressed a finger to my lips. "Shh, it's our secret, love. One day, you'll understand why I kept it hidden. But promise me, never tell anyone." She nodded, her little curls bouncing. "I promise." For weeks I played my role. I let them think me feeble, lost in my memories. But every time they turned their backs, I was preparing. I contacted my solicitor, updated my will, and arranged for a little surprise at the grand gathering. The night finally arrived. The house glittered with candles, laughter, and the sound of violins. Margaret was dressed in a gown of emerald silk, her neck dripping with jewels she had bought using Charles's strained salary. She floated about the room like a queen, greeting her guests, showing off every corner of the house as if she owned it. Charles trailed behind, laughing nervously, drinking too much, his face red with shame and exhaustion. I sat quietly in the corner, dressed in my old lace shawl, my silver hair pinned neatly. Most guests ignored me, assuming I was some relic tucked away in the shadows. But I watched. Oh, I watched. And then came the moment. The violinist paused. Margaret tapped her glass for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "thank you for joining us tonight. This house, our house, means so much to us. We've worked so hard to restore it, to make it worthy of your presence. Our house. Worked so hard. My blood boiled, but I kept my lips sealed until the very moment the solicitor entered. He carried a leather case, his shoes clicking against the polished floor. Margaret frowned in confusion. Charles paled, and the guests turned to look. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, bowing to me, "as per your instructions, I have brought the documents." The room fell silent. Margaret's smile froze. "Documents? What is this?" I rose slowly, my cane tapping against the floor. My voice trembled at first, but then it grew strong, echoing through the grand room. "This house is mine. It always has been. And tonight, it is time the truth came out." I took the case, opened it, and pulled out the papers. Gasps rippled through the room as I laid them on the table. "For years you have mocked me, called me useless, invisible. But while you laughed, I was guarding a secret. A fortune, investments, accounts, bonds. Enough wealth to buy every one of you 10 times over. And this house, it was never yours. It is mine. And it will remain mine until the day I choose otherwise." Margaret stammered, her face pale. "What nonsense is this?" The solicitor cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore speaks the truth. She is the sole owner of this property, and her bank account is substantial." He hesitated, glancing at me, then added, "Very substantial." The guests whispered, eyes wide, some even smiling at me with newfound respect. Margaret looked as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Charles, my son, he stared at me with something between fear and shame. I looked him in the eyes and whispered, "You let them mock me, Charles. Your own mother. But now the mask has fallen. You see me, don't you? At last." Oh, my dear listener, the silence that followed was the sweetest music I had ever heard. The silence after my words stretched so long, I could hear the fire crackle and the rain drip against the windows outside. Faces turned pale, wine glasses trembled in nervous hands, and Margaret's jaw opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. My dear listener, do you know that moment when mockery dies on someone's lips, when their laughter curdles into fear? It is sweeter than honey. I had waited years for that silence, and now it filled every corner of the room. Margaret recovered first, or at least tried. She forced a smile, though her lips quivered. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice a brittle whisper. "Surely Mother doesn't know what she's talking about. She's confused." "Yes, confused." A ripple of murmurs ran through the guests. Some shifted uncomfortably, others raised eyebrows. My solicitor cleared his throat again, his voice firm. "Mrs. Whitmore is not confused. The documents are crystal clear. This estate, the accounts, the bonds, all in her name. I have verified everything personally." The guests exchanged glances, their respect swinging like a pendulum, away from Margaret and toward me. How quickly admiration shifts when wealth enters the room. Margaret's face flushed crimson. Charles downed the rest of his drink, then slammed the glass onto the table. His eyes were wide, his voice hoarse. "Mother, why didn't you tell us?" I looked at him steadily, my heart breaking even as my voice sharpened. "Because you didn't deserve to know. You let them laugh at me. You let them treat me like dirt in my own home. You chose silence, Charles. My own son." His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, he couldn't look me in the eye. Oh, how painful it is to wound your own child. But sometimes truth is the sharpest weapon, and it cuts whether you want it to or not. Margaret, of course, would not give up so easily. She stepped forward, clutching the back of a chair as though it could steady her rage. This is absurd, even if it's true. What of it? Your old mother. You can't possibly manage all this money. You'll need us. You'll always need us. The laughter that followed, not mine, but the guests, nearly shattered her. They laughed at her arrogance, at her desperation, and for the first time, the mocking wasn't aimed at me. I leaned on my cane, my voice low but strong. No, Margaret, I don't need you. You need me. And now, everyone here knows it. Her eyes burned with hatred. I could see it plain as day. If she could have clawed my face in that moment, she would have. But she was trapped, bound by the audience that surrounded us. The rest of the evening was chaos. Guests whispered. Some politely excused themselves. Others lingered with wide smiles, eager to curry favor with me now that the truth was known. Margaret tried to salvage the night, but her laughter sounded hollow. Her hands trembled as she poured wine, and her mask kept slipping. Charles drank until his words slurred. And me? I sat in the corner once more. But this time, oh this time, I was not invisible. Every eye in that room had seen me. Every whisper carried my name. When the last guest had left, and the candles had burned low, the real storm began. Margaret slammed the door shut, her face twisted with fury. How dare you humiliate us like that? In front of everyone. You've ruined everything. I met her gaze calmly. No, Margaret. I saved everything. I saved myself. And perhaps, if you'd had even an ounce of respect for me, I might have shared my fortune with you. But not now. Not ever. Charles stumbled forward, his voice breaking. Mother, please, don't do this. Don't turn us into beggars. I wanted to reach for him, to cradle his head like I had when he was a boy. But I held back. He needed to learn. They both did. You will not starve, Charles. I raised you better than that, but you will no longer live off me like parasites. If you wish to stay in this house, you will treat me with dignity. If not, the door is always open. Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You wouldn't dare. I leaned closer, my whisper sharp as a blade. Try me. That night the house was silent, but it was not peace. It was the silence of a battlefield after the first cannon has fired. Days turned into weeks, and the tension thickened. Margaret grew colder, her words sharper. Charles avoided me, ashamed, yet still chained to her side. And little Emily, she remained my light. She would sneak into my room with biscuits, her tiny hands slipping into mine. Gran, she whispered one evening, Mummy's angry all the time now. Are you going to send us away? I kissed her forehead, my heart aching. No, my love, not you, never you. But in truth, I was considering it. I had the power now. I could throw them out, sell the house, and live alone in peace. Yet something in me hesitated. Was it love for my son? Was it fear of loneliness? Or was it the cruel hope that they might change? One night, I overheard them arguing in the drawing room. Margaret's voice was sharp. She can't live forever, Charles. And when she's gone, it'll all be ours. We just have to wait. My breath caught. Wait. That was their plan. To endure me until I died. To claim what was mine when I was nothing but dust. And that was when I decided. Waiting was their weapon. But it would be mine too. I began to weave a new plan, deeper than before. It wasn't enough to shock them once. I would make every day of their waiting a torment. I would dangle the fortune before their eyes, just out of reach, and watch their greed consume them. But oh dear listener, you must know, vengeance is a dangerous companion. It feeds you, yes, but it also eats at you. And soon, the lines between love, justice, and cruelty blur until you no longer know which path you're walking. That winter, As snow fell thick upon the English countryside, the house became a prison of whispers and glares. Margaret tried to charm me again. Her voice honeyed, her smile false. She brought me tea one afternoon, setting it down gently. "You know, Mother, we only want what's best for you. Perhaps you should let us help manage your accounts. It must be exhausting for you, keeping track of everything." I sipped the tea, never breaking her gaze. "Don't worry yourself, dear. I have everything in perfect order. I write every figure down, every pound and penny. My mind is sharp enough." Her smile faltered. "Of course. I only meant—" "I know what you meant." She left the room in silence, her footsteps heavy. Oh, my dear, I almost pitied her then. Almost. But the pity vanished the day I caught her rifling through my desk drawers. I had stepped quietly into the study, and there she was, her fingers digging through my papers like claws. When she saw me, she froze, her face drained of color. "Looking for something?" I asked softly. She stammered. I thought you might need help organizing." I closed the drawer myself. Locking it with a key, I kept on a chain around my neck. "No need. I organize my life quite well, even at my age." Her eyes flicked to the chain, and I knew then she wouldn't stop, not until she had the key. So I began keeping my most precious papers elsewhere. The solicitor agreed to safeguard them, hidden from greedy hands. But something darker brewed in that house, something beyond my plans. For one night, I heard Margaret whisper to Charles in the kitchen, "If she won't hand it over willingly, we'll have to make her. People fall downstairs all the time, don't they?" My blood turned to ice, and yet, instead of fear, a strange calm settled over me. If they wished to play that game, then so be it. They had forgotten one thing. I was not helpless. And I had already written letters, arranged protections, set traps they could not even imagine. You see, dear listener, the war had only just begun. And if you're still listening, if your heart is pounding as mine did that night, please give this story a like. Share it with someone who needs reminding that age is not weakness. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Stay silent or fight back. I long to know, because the next chapter of my tale is where the fight turns deadly. The plotting in that house grew like mold in a damp corner, slow, unseen at first, then spreading its dark roots until it smelled of rot. I would have thought, in my younger days, that family was a shelter from such things. But shelter does not stop the slow drip of greed. Margaret and Charles began to move with the furtive steps of conspirators. Looks passed between them that froze me in my chair, and I learned the dangerous language of their silence. They thought they were cunning. They thought an old woman could not see the shadow of their intentions. How naively they underestimated what years teach you. How to read faces, how to count breaths, how to plant listening ears in the creases of curtains. One evening, when the sky outside was the color of old pewter, and the heating had failed again. Such a hardware trouble Margaret always blamed on old-fashioned pipes. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same chair my husband loved before he was taken, and listened to the sounds of my home. The house groaned in its bones. The clock ticked like a metronome, marking out my patience. And upstairs, the bedroom door thudded softly as Margaret paced. I could hear her whispering to Charles, low, urgent phrases. "We can't wait. She must not find out. It will all be ours if we are careful." I would not be hurried. Patience was a weapon as precise as any knife. I had sharpened it for decades. Still, as the words sank into me, a coldness pooled in my stomach. They were planning. They were plotting, and if they were willing to plan, then it was because they believed they had nothing to lose. That night, I opened a bottle of plum jam I had made years ago and spread it thick on a slice of bread. Emily found me in the sitting room, small and earnest, her face streaked with soap from a bath. Clutching a toy rabbit, she climbed onto my lap, and I held her as if she might thaw at my touch. Gran, she whispered, Mummy is so cross. She keeps saying we must be careful. Her small hands fumbled with the rabbit's ear. Do you think she's scared of you, Gran? The honesty of a child is a sudden slap. Stinging, waking. No, love, I answered, smoothing her hair. She thinks she can scare me. But fear is a funny thing. Sometimes it looks like courage. I could have told Emily everything then. The safe account numbers, the solicitor who waited, the chain of trustees I had lined up. But some truths a child should never carry. I kissed her head and promised. When you're older, I will tell you why I did what I did. For now, keep smiling and be brave. She looked at me with the solemnity of the very young and nodded. Days that followed were a study in small violences. Margaret stopped pretending to be my helper and took to deliberate slights, throwing out the cushions I loved, rearranging photographs to hide the faces of our ancestors, changing the tea I drank for something she called lighter. Once, she put a bowl of store-bought scones on the table and said, loud enough for the maids to hear, "Oh, Mother, you'd never want these, would you? Your tastes are so quaint." The maids, terrified of displeasing the mistress, laughed uncertainly. I smiled at them, with a face I hoped kept no hint of the storm inside me. During an ordinary Thursday, a letter arrived. It was not from the solicitor, but from someone I had not seen in years. My brother James, who had settled in Cornwall after the war. He had once been a reckless, loving fool, and his handwriting carried a tilt of mischief I remembered from childhood. He wrote to say he was visiting to see my face. Nothing more. I told my solicitor at once, and he suggested we make him a part of the plan. You see, dear listener, allies are like salt. The right measure preserves a dish. Too much ruins it. James's visit would be the perfect pinch. When he arrived, 2 days later, hair white like mine but with a spark in his eyes, the air changed. He embraced me with the force of the sea, words tumbling out in a voice that had not been tamed by polite society. "Marjorie!" he cried, using the name I had not heard in decades. "What mischief have you been up to?" He hugged Emily and scolded Charles in a whisper for letting his mother treat me badly. Charles flushed and slunk away, but James was not a man who feared confrontation. Under his watchful, roguish presence, I felt a new layer of courage bloom. With James at my side, I began my quieter cruelties. I spoke to the servants more in front of Margaret, praising their kindness, slipping small coins into their palms when she couldn't see. I encouraged them to keep receipts of what went in and out of the pantry, to write down gifts or small sums Margaret suddenly found. I asked the housekeeper to keep a ledger. I asked the cook to note every day what came from the markets. People who wish to hide their conscience must also hide their ledgers. Paper never lies, and I knew the truth would be more persuasive than any tirade. Margaret, ever so bright at feigning ignorance, began to make mistakes. She purchased an extravagant dress on credit and asked Charles to sign a receipt in his name. She had one of her indulgent evenings with friends and left a check in plain view on the mantelpiece. Small things, foolish things. Greed has a way of making the grandest actors careless. And then, oh, the dark hour I had waited for. One of those careless acts set the stage for the collapse I had long imagined. Late one night, Margaret returned from the theatre with a friend, flushed and loud. She stumbled into the drawing room, and in a display of bravado meant to provoke, she tossed her muff on my antique table and knocked over a small porcelain jug my mother had given me. The jug shattered with a cry like a struck bird. "What a clumsy old thing," she said, laughing as if the shards were confetti. All the air in the room went thin. I walked over, feeling every eye upon me, and picked up a piece of the jug. The lines of blue painted across the porcelain were part of my history. The hands that had painted them long dead, but their art lingering like a promise. I turned to Margaret and very softly said, You break what you do not appreciate. Her friends tittered, but Charles, poor wretched soul, reddened anew. It was an accident, Margaret lied. Honestly, Mother, why must you make everything into a drama? She slurred the word drama, as if it were a disease. Only the elderly suffered. That night, while she slept, I moved, not in the way you imagine, with threats or violence, but in the small surgical acts of a woman who has learned to pivot a household with the quiet of a spine. I wrote a letter to the bank, requesting a transfer of certain funds to be placed under the care of trustees. Legal protections that could not be touched until explicit conditions were met. I authorized the solicitor to begin a guardianship review that would examine the management of my estate, which would necessitate interviews with family and staff. I had him prepare amendment papers to my will that named Emily as the principal beneficiary of a trust, with strict conditions, protecting her from the influence of anyone who might seek to manipulate her. You must understand, what I sought was not vengeance in the crude sense of seeing them suffer. It was a fortress of safety around the child who reached for my hand in the dark. I wanted her to have a life that would never hang by the thread of Margaret's temper or Charles's cowardice when Margaret discovered the letters. And discover them she did. Her face was a storm that had finally broken. She came into my room with that look, the one that promised all the fury of a woman scorned. "What are these?" she demanded, snatching the solicitor's envelope from my dressing table as if it burned. Her fingers trembled. "You can't do this to us. You won't leave us penniless." I felt a strange pity then, mingled with an iron certainty. "I am ensuring the child's future," I said. "If you had treated me with respect, if you had not made our home a place of mockery, there might have been a place for you in that security. But your hands reached for my things, while your heart reached only into your own pocket." She lunged at me then, with words sharper than a blade. "You will not get away with this, Gran. People will think you mad. They will have you examined." A threat. The old threat. The insinuation that an old woman is merely an infirm mind to be dismissed. But I was no rattling tin of a person to be tested and broken. I struck back in a way Margaret did not foresee, with exposure. I invited two of her closest confidants for tea the very next day, a gentle deception, and while we spoke, all syruped politeness and carefully placed biscuits, I let slip, casually, that I had asked our solicitor to review the household accounts. "Oh, Margaret," I murmured aloud, "it must be terribly difficult to keep the books when you have so many charities and friends to please." The friends, polite and eager to remain on the winning side, exchanged uneasy glances. The seed of doubt grew roots. Little by little, the house fissured. Gossip is a blade that cuts both ways. Servants, who had once been cowed by Margaret's scorn, began to look upon her with guarded eyes. A maid discovered Margaret's theatre receipts tucked behind the studies of my old ledger, and, shocked, took a photo and showed it to the housekeeper. A neighbor called in curiosity one afternoon, and a stray comment about the family troubles bred rumors that reached ears even further beyond our street. You might call this petty warfare. Perhaps it was, but there comes a point when small otherings coalesce into a mass that cannot be ignored. Margaret's anger turned frantic. She began to attempt to sully my reputation at the women's club, whispering that I was forgetful, that I had taken to making strange financial decisions in a fit of loneliness. People loved scandal. They swallowed it like sweetmeats. But they also loved novelty, and whispers change hands faster than truth can be spoken. What she hadn't counted on was that the truth was in the paperwork and in the witnesses I had gathered when the solicitor called for an independent audit, not to shame but to confirm. The accounts revealed a careful, steady stewardship. The auditors were not men given to theatrics. They were officers of fact. They verified the holdings I had claimed, and bowed politely at my fiscal sagacity. Their reports, cold and bureaucratic, were the hammer that would crack Margaret's brittle facade. Then the cruelest thing happened, the one that sits heavy on my chest when I think of it. Charles, my son, came to me with tear-streaked cheeks and asked for a reprieve. He pleaded, "Mother, we're drowning." Margaret says, if we lose the house, the children will be homeless. The voice of a man caught between shame and need is a sorrowful thing. It made me ache for the boy I had once fed warm bread to at midnight. But the lines of his choices were drawn. He had the chance to remold himself, and he chose blandness, the safer path that led him back to Margaret. In the solitude of that night, after I had locked the account books and sat by the fire until the embers went out, I made a decision that would define the rest of my days. I would not allow fear to make me soft. There are weapons softer than steel. Patience, paper, quiet alliances. And I had them in abundance. Yet there would come a time when I must use louder instruments, not to break them, although perhaps to teach them, but to protect what matters. My hand trembled as I picked up an old photo of my husband, his face young and laughing, and I promised him, to the moon outside and to the echoes of that house, that the child who adored me would never learn to fear hunger or contempt. That promise was my covenant. If you have stayed with me through this, dear listener, do me a favor. Press like, and if you have a moment, share this story with someone who believes old age means silence. Write in the comments what you think I should do next. Stand firm and expose them completely, or give them a chance to change. Your thoughts are the small lights I carry with me, for the next move is near, and it will be one that none of them expect. The house was quieter now, in a way that made the bones of it ache. Every footstep seemed louder in the hush that fell between us. After the auditors left with their neat reports, and the solicitor had filed the amended trusts, Margaret wore fury like a cloak. But behind the rage, there was something sharper and faster. Panic. Greed has poor manners when it realizes the banquet is about to be taken from it. I watched her from my window, one grey morning as she stood at the gate, speaking in urgent bursts on her mobile. Her shoulders were hunched like a soldier bracing for a storm. She did not notice me watching, and perhaps that was for the best. People reveal themselves in the small moments when they think no one looks. She thought she still had time. She thought legalities were obstacles for the timid, things you waited out. How wrong she was. I had been busy with other things. James and I had been making quiet visits to a few people who seldom sat at tables with the wealthy, a social worker in the town hall, an old friend of mine who now kept a small charity for children, and a retired judge I had known since court days, a man who respected the written word like scripture. I was not interested in revenge that ruined people. That was the work of younger, cruel hands. I sought a firewall, something that would protect Emily and the honest staff who had kept me company in the dark times. Still, one does not build a firewall without lighting a match to see the boundaries. And sometimes a bit of heat makes frailty show itself for what it is. Margaret would not wait for the law to carry her away politely. She moved in a swiftness that surprised me. Forged signatures, a forged note here, a hastily arranged power of attorney discussed in whispers with a solicitor I had never met. It was clumsy in places, deft in others, but there was one thing she had not accounted for: the hands in the ledger that watched. The housekeeper, Miriam, a steady woman with hands toughened by years of scrubbing, but a heart as keen as a hawk's, found an irregularity. She was organizing the pantry accounts in the ledger I had requested when she noticed a blank check tucked under a roll of stamps. The check bore Margaret's scroll and had been signed with a flourish that did not match the usual handwriting on household documents. Miriam, who had seen many things but never forgery, tucked the check into her apron with trembling fingers, and came to me at dusk. "Gran," she whispered, voice thin with fear, "I think Mistress Margaret is taking money. I don't know how to say it, but the way the numbers don't add up. And I found this." She held out the slip of paper like a secret relic. I took it with a steadiness I did not feel, and my breath went very slow. A sharp, cold crystal sliced through me, not from the discovery, but from the betrayal. To steal from your own roof is a deeper kind of cruelty. I pressed my palms together, the way my mother once did when she prayed, and for the first time in days, I let a plan that had been circling in my mind take flight. That night, I summoned the family to the drawing room, under the pretense of a small memorial for my late husband. A reading of his old letters. A sentimental thing Margaret loved because it made her appear reverent. I asked the solicitor to attend, though I did not tell Margaret why. I asked James to be there. I asked Miriam to sit where she could be seen. I made sure the housekeeper dropped a number of domestic hints that would cause the servants to chatter without meaning to. A skill one learns when you know how gossip can be a blade used for justice. As everyone gathered, the atmosphere thrummed like a tightened string. I read from my husband's letters, letting the memory of their simple honesty fill the air. Margaret smirked to the guests, but her hands betrayed her. They would not stop fidgeting. When I finished, I turned to the solicitor with a small, deliberate smile. "Before we have tea," I said, "there is a matter of household business I would like to address. It concerns a check and the integrity of our home." I kept my voice soft, so soft that the room leaned in. Margaret's laugh, brittle and sharp, snapped. "What are you playing at, Mother?" she asked, venom naked now. I nodded to Miriam. She stood, hands steady, and produced the check. "I found this," she said plainly. It was hidden in the back of the study. The room inhaled as one body. The solicitor, trained in the art of neutral expression, went white. Margaret swore, then tried to claw back dignity with a smooth performance. "It's nothing. A payment for a dress. An expense. Trivial. Really." But the ledger Miriam had kept, the little book with neat sums and dates, said otherwise. Numbers do not have malice in them. They simply show what is. The check had been used to pay off a debt in the theatre, a debt that did not belong to household expenses. Charles stammered, his eyes anywhere but on Margaret. "Maggie, what have you done?" he whispered, but his voice was a child's whimper. When the solicitor spoke, his words were the tip of the hammer I had been preparing. "Mrs. Whitmore asked me to begin an audit on the household accounts. The audit has found irregular payments. Some of these payments have been traced to accounts connected to a solicitor and a theatre box office. We will need to involve the authorities to determine the nature of these transactions." Margaret's face went a colour I had not seen since winter nights when frost ate the roses. Ashen and quickly, a flushing guilt, she made one last attempt to command the room with bluster, but the air had shifted. Friends who had once clinked their glasses with her now edged to the windows, whispering about the scandal. The servants, emboldened by Miriam's courage and my quiet support, watched with a new respect. What followed was not a movie's grand arrest. The law moves in slow pens and careful forms. Papers were filed, statements were taken. The small theatre where Margaret had been spending money was contacted. Margaret refused to answer at first. Then when she realized the net drew closer, she went frantic. She slapped her palm over her mouth, like someone hearing a prophecy of doom. It was in that crunch of terror that something unexpected happened. One of Margaret's friends, the woman who always sat at the head of her little dining table of gossip, broke like thin ice. She leaned forward in a decisive way and said, in a voice that cut through the pretensions, "Maggie, you know you've been reckless. We only helped cover for a little while. This has to stop. For the children's sake." Her words were a betrayal that tasted like salt. When the police finally came, not in dramatic fashion, but with polite offices and business-like questions. Margaret's facade crumbled. She offered excuses, tears, indignation, and then, when pressed, only silence. The authorities took statements. The solicitor handed over copies of transactions. The theatre manager confirmed a series of extravagant nights out and tickets purchased under odd names. It was legally a mess for them and a moral ruin for Margaret. My son watched it unfold with a kind of stunned grief, as if watching himself unravel into a stranger. I will not lie, my heart bled for him. He had been soft, because he feared loss more than he feared shame. But there is a distinction between pity and enabling, and I had chosen a side. The immediate consequence was a freezing of certain household accounts pending investigation, and a temporary restraining order on large withdrawals until the auditors could finalize their report. Margaret's access to funds was limited. She begged, she raged, she attempted to charm the remaining friends, and in those moments, she was not pretty. Greed makes people ugly in ways the young cannot imagine. What I had not expected, though perhaps I should have, was the way small cruelties had consequences that looped back in odd ways. The theatre had an auditor of its own. They discovered that the funds Margaret had been funneling around had been used to pay off a loan a friend had taken for a business that was not running as it claimed. That friend, when confronted with the evidence, fell to his knees and confessed a web of debts and deceit that implicated others. Each confession pulled another thread until the whole fabric of that social circle revealed its moth-eaten self. In the middle of the upheaval, Emily watched with eyes wide and confused. She did not understand the mechanics of money and law, but she felt the changes. The way her mother no longer smiled in the same way, the way the house buzzed with awkward whispers. Her small hand would find mine in the night and squeeze, as if to ask whether everything would be all right. I would draw her close and say, "Yes, love, we are clearing out the cobwebs." It would have been easy then to snap shut the book and declare the victory complete. The house would have steadied itself, Margaret chastened, the accounts sorted, and life could have returned to a new, quiet normal. But that is not my story, nor the way life often gives justice. The heart is trickier than paper, and the taste for power is a persistent worm. Margaret, deprived and hounded by scandal, changed tactics. If she could no longer use pockets, she would use people. She began to target Miriam and the other servants with small cruelties, meant to frighten them into silence. She whispered to them about loyalty and how accusation invited ruin. She played on their fears, on the precariousness of their jobs. And because the law moves slowly, because reputations can be blackened in an afternoon, I realized then that protection can not only be legal, it must be social and communal. You must harden the hearts around you with truth, so that the cowardice of a few cannot drive others into silence. So I did what an old woman who had lived through bomb shelters and empty pantries knows how to do. I gathered allies. I invited the neighbors, the charity workers, the headmistress of Emily's little school, and the local vicar for a tea that was, for once, both a calling and a ceremony. I told them, simply and plainly, what had happened. I showed them the ledger, the check, Miriam's trembling receipt, and the auditor's preliminary findings. I did not shout. I did not preach. I recited facts, and facts have their own dignity. People responded with the quiet decency that often hides from cameras. Many of the neighbors had long suspected Margaret's extravagance. They had their own small grievances. The garden left untended, a dog left barking at night. But when they saw the ledger and the photo Miriam had shown them, their concern turned into support. Several offered to take statements, others to host Emily at weekends, so she could be away from the crossfire, and a few even promised to act as references for Miriam should Margaret seek to dismiss her. The ripple of small kindnesses built into a wall the size of a castle. It did not stop Margaret's tantrums. She raged into rooms, throwing porcelain that would have been my mother's heart, stamped her feet, and laid blame like baited hooks. But hooks catch nothing when the pond is already full. And yet, as I watched these events unfold, a different fear took root in me. The legal protection and the social support were firm, but there was a shadow I could not account for. Public opinion's hunger for sensation. Newspapers had caught wind of the family dispute, and small headlines began to appear, pecking at our privacy. The tabloids love a fallen lady and a scandal in a Georgian house. They love narratives that pit the home against a secret fortune. My old bones felt the cold draft of publicity. I did not want Emily to be exposed to the sticky glare of strangers' curiosity. So I made one more move. Quieter than the last, a statement, composed with the solicitor, that would be released only when the auditors had finished and the investigators had a clear path. The statement was short and firm, that I had acted to secure the welfare of my granddaughter in the face of irregularities, and that an investigation was underway. That small legal sentence would hold back the tabloids for a little while. It was a dam against the flood. You must excuse the pause here, for my hands tremble with memory as I tell you these things. If you are still with me, please press like and subscribe. If my voice has given you even the smallest courage, leave a comment about what you think of Margaret, villain or tragic figure. I read every single one, and your words are a comfort to this old heart. The storm had not ended, only changed shape. Margaret may have been exposed in part, but the hunger for control does not die easily. She plotted, whispering to a solicitor in another town, trying to rig things so she might regain access, or, failing that, rebuild her social standing to squeeze the house back from me. And in the midst of this, an altogether different murmur began. One that would lead me to a discovery I had not expected, and to a choice that would reveal whether mercy could ever live in the same room with cunning. When a house grows quiet, after too much shouting, you learn to hear the smallest sounds. The creak of a floorboard 2 rooms away, the scrape of a drawer being opened, the muffled hiss of a whisper through plaster walls. That silence had become my companion. I would sit by the window, Emily asleep upstairs, and listen to the house breathe its uneasy breaths. I knew Margaret was plotting again. A woman like her cannot survive without schemes. It is the food she eats, the air she breathes. What I did not expect was the rumor. It came to me first through Miriam, who returned one market morning with her hands full of pears and her eyes full of worry. "Gran," she whispered, "people are talking. They say Margaret has been telling folks you're losing your mind, that you've gone senile, that the money isn't safe with you." For a moment, I simply stared at her, the words heavy and bitter. Of course, when money fails, reputation is the next weapon. If they could not take my fortune directly, they would try to make me unfit to hold it. I smiled thinly and set the pears in the bowl. "Then we must give them a show, Miriam. If Margaret wants a stage, I'll choose the script." I called for a family dinner. Not a grand affair this time, but a smaller, intimate one. Just family, and 2 neighbors, invited for company. Margaret, eager for any chance to parade her false charm, agreed. She even fussed over the table settings herself, as though polishing silver could polish her soul. When the night came, the fire crackled, candles flickered, and the smell of roasted lamb filled the halls. Margaret was in rare form, laughing too loudly, pressing wine into every hand, her voice dripping with sweetness. She thought she had the upper hand again. It was after dessert, when conversation lulled, that I cleared my throat. "I've heard some curious things said about me," I began, my voice quiet but carrying. "That I'm old, yes, and that my memory is failing. That perhaps I'm unfit." I let the word dangle like bait in water. Margaret froze, her glass halfway to her lips. The neighbors leaned forward, curious. I folded my hands. So let us test this, shall we? Margaret, since you believe I forget so easily, perhaps you'd like to remind us what happened last winter on the 15th of January. A small date, but I remember it well. Her smile faltered. Why, Mother, how should I interrupted, my tone sharp. It was the day the grocer delivered a double order of potatoes by mistake. You sent them back, grumbling about wasted money. Do you remember? The neighbors chuckled. They remembered too. The story had traveled through the village. And Charles, I said softly, turning to my son, on the 12th of March, you came home soaked through, boots ruined from the rain. Do you recall what I said to you? His eyes softened with shame. You told me to leave them by the hearth, and that you'd had worse in the war years. I smiled faintly. And Emily, I called to my granddaughter, who sat between us, wide-eyed. On the 24th of April, you lost your red ribbon in the garden. Where did we find it? In the rose bush, she cried, delighted. The neighbors laughed, nodding, impressed. My voice grew firm. You see, my memory does not fail me. What fails is the respect in this house. The silence that followed was delicious. Margaret's cheeks flushed crimson, her smile dead on her lips. She knew she'd been caught. Her slander turned back on her. But dear listener, here's where the twist lies. Instead of silence, she struck harder. Later that night, after the neighbors left, Margaret cornered me in the hallway. Her face twisted. You may have embarrassed me tonight, but it won't last. People will believe what I tell them, not what you prove. You're old, and old people are forgotten sooner or later. Her words were knives, but I had weathered worse storms. I leaned close, my whisper sharp as the wind outside. Perhaps, but you forget one thing, Margaret. Forgotten or not, I've already made sure my fortune will never be yours. You can destroy my name, but you will inherit nothing but ashes. She gasped, her hands clenching at her sides. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not just greed, but fear. From that night on, the war turned colder, quieter. Margaret no longer mocked me openly. She smiled with her teeth, spoke with honey, but her eyes followed every movement I made. And I, in turn, moved my pieces carefully. I visited the solicitor more often. I wrote letters late into the night. I secured Emily's future with bonds Margaret could never touch. And yet, in the stillness of my room, I sometimes ask myself, how far should I go? Do I crush them completely, or do I leave a door open for redemption? Dear listener, tell me, if you were in my place, would you forgive? Or would you let them drown in the pit they dug for themselves? Write it in the comments, because this story is not just mine. It belongs to all of us who have been mocked, underestimated, discarded. And remember, if you've listened this far, do subscribe. Your company keeps my old heart alive as I share the shadows of this house with you. But do not think the tale is done, for soon, something happened that even I had not foreseen. Something that would turn Margaret's schemes from petty cruelty into true danger. And in that moment, I learned that survival is not only about money, but about life itself. The house had grown restless, like an old dog pacing in circles before a storm. I could feel it in the walls, in the way the firewood cracked too sharply, in the creak of the staircase, when no one was climbing it. Margaret's defeat at the dinner table had not ended her hunger. It had sharpened it. A person stripped of dignity and money is like a wolf with a wound. More dangerous because they are desperate. I knew she was waiting for a chance to strike, and yet I underestimated how far she was willing to go. It began with small things. A loose rug left at the top of the stairs, though I distinctly remembered asking Miriam to tack it down. A step on the back porch, left slick with water after a rainstorm, as if someone had poured a bucket there. And once, oh, I'll never forget. I woke in the night to find the gas stove hissing softly, a blue flame unlit, the smell heavy in the air. Had Miriam not checked the kitchen before bed? We might all have suffocated in our sleep. Accidents, Margaret called them, feigning innocence. But her eyes betrayed her. She wanted me gone, sooner rather than later. I told myself not to be afraid. After all, I had survived the war, rationing, air raid sirens. What is one greedy woman compared to bombs falling from the sky? But fear has a way of creeping in, especially in the dark hours when you are alone with only the ticking of the clock for company. It was Emily who gave me strength. One evening, as I brushed her hair by the fire, she looked up at me with wide, serious eyes. "Gran, why does Mummy hate you?" My hand stilled on the brush. Children see more than we think. I bent down and kissed her soft hair. "Your mummy doesn't hate me, love. She just doesn't understand me. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to be kind. But you're kind," Emily said simply. "And you tell the truth." Her words warmed me more than any fire could. I knew then I couldn't allow Margaret's poison to shape that child. I had to endure, not just for myself, but for Emily. Still, endurance alone would not be enough. I had to act. So, late one night, when the house was sleeping, I took out the small wooden box hidden in the false bottom of my wardrobe. Inside were letters, documents, keys. The evidence of every move I had made to secure my fortune and Emily's future. I spread them on my desk and began writing a final letter, one that would be opened if anything should happen to me. In it, I detailed Margaret's cruelties, her manipulations, and the strange accidents that had nearly ended my life. If Margaret thought she could push me down the stairs or snuff me out with gas, she would find herself standing in the ruins of her own schemes, with the world knowing the truth. But here, dear listener, is where the tale grows darker still. For it was not just Margaret I had to fear. My own son, Charles, the boy I had carried, nursed, and loved, was beginning to crack beneath the weight of it all. He drank more heavily now, his eyes bloodshot, his voice hoarse. Some nights I would hear him arguing with Margaret in the kitchen, his voice breaking. "This has gone too far, Maggie. She's my mother." And yet, he never stood beside me, not once. His love was weak, tied in knots by Margaret's will. And weakness, I fear, is more dangerous than hatred. A hater you can see coming. A weak man might betray you without meaning to. It was in late autumn, when the nights grew long, and the fog rolled thick across the fields, that the danger came to a head. I was descending the stairs with my cane, when suddenly, the banister gave way beneath my hand. Screws ripped from wood, the rail collapsing, my body pitching forward. I cried out, clutching for balance. For one terrible moment, I thought it was the end. But the old reflexes of a mother, the strength of years carrying babies, hauling coal, steadying herself through war, saved me. I dropped my cane and caught myself against the wall, my shoulder slamming hard, but I remained upright. When I looked down, Margaret was at the bottom of the stairs, watching. Her face was pale, her hands wringing her apron. And yet, I swear to you, dear listener, there was no shock in her eyes. Only disappointment. She whispered, "Are you hurt?" But her voice trembled with something darker. I straightened slowly, my heart pounding. "No, Margaret," I said softly. "Not this time." And in that moment, we both knew. The pretense was gone. The battle lines had been drawn. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in years. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak and sigh of the house. And I whispered to myself, I will not let her win. I will not die by her hand. Dear listener, do you feel the chill of that night as I tell you this? Do you feel the shadow of danger in a house that should have been a sanctuary? If you do, please, press like, share this story so others know the truth of what greed can do. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done, standing on those stairs with death at your heels? Because what came after was the moment everything changed. After the banister incident, Sleep rarely came to me. Even when I drifted into slumber, I awoke with my heart racing, convinced I'd heard footsteps creeping toward my door. Some nights, I'd sit upright in bed until dawn, listening, my cane across my lap, like a soldier clutching his rifle. But it was in those sleepless hours that my resolve hardened. Margaret thought me weak, fragile, a relic ready to be swept aside. She had no idea how many storms I'd weathered, nor how cunning age can make you. Youth has speed, yes, but age has patience, and patience can turn into a weapon. So I began to plan, not just to defend myself, but to trap her. The first step was to become smaller in their eyes. I allowed myself to shuffle slower, to sigh more often, to appear confused at times. I even left my spectacles off at dinner, so I'd squint and fumble with my fork. Margaret smirked across the table, whispering to Charles that I was slipping. Exactly what I wanted her to think. Meanwhile, behind locked doors, I was busy writing letters, making copies of documents, sealing envelopes with wax. I contacted my solicitor in town through secret notes delivered by Emily's doll. Yes, the little one with the blue dress. Emily thought it a game when I asked her to take Dolly for a walk to Mr. Hargreaves's office. Margaret, of course, never suspected. By the time autumn bled into winter, the trap was ready. It was on a Sunday afternoon, just before Christmas. The family gathered in the drawing room, the fire blazing, carols humming faintly from the radio. Emily sat on the rug, building a tower with wooden blocks. Charles dozed in his chair, glass of brandy in hand. And Margaret. Oh! Margaret hovered near the tree, rearranging the baubles, as though the world itself might fall apart if one was crooked. I had been waiting for this moment. Charles, I said, my voice trembling just enough to sound weak. Would you fetch my purse from the hall table? I must show you something important. He grumbled, but rose, his heavy steps retreating. That left Margaret alone with me. Slowly I leaned forward, my cane tapping the hearthstone. Margaret, I whispered, loud enough for her to hear, but soft enough that Emily remained engrossed in her blocks. Do you truly think I don't see what you're doing? Her hand froze on a bauble. She turned, her smile brittle. I don't know what you mean, Mother. Oh, you know, I said, my eyes locking on hers. The gas, the stairs, the rug. You want me gone. Her lips twitched, and for a heartbeat, the mask slipped. The coldness in her eyes chilled me to the marrow. Perhaps it's for the best, she murmured. You've lived your life. You take up space. You drain Charles' patience. And Emily, she glanced at the child, deserves a future without shadows from the past. I felt my heart pound, but I forced myself to smile. How fortunate then, I whispered, that I prepared for this. And just then, Charles re-entered, purse in hand. Sit, my boy, I said sweetly. There's something I must tell you both. Margaret stiffened, but it was too late. I reached into my purse and withdrew a small sealed envelope. Inside this envelope, I said, is a letter addressed to my solicitor. It details every accident that has occurred in this house, and it names the one responsible. Charles blinked, his face paling. Mother, I held up my hand. If anything should happen to me, Mr. Hargreaves has instructions to open it, along with the documents I've placed in his care. He will know everything. Margaret's face turned the color of ash. You're bluffing, am I? I asked quietly. Would you like to risk it? For the first time, silence hung between us like a noose. The crackle of the fire, Emily's little hums, the faint ticking of the clock. Every sound grew louder. Margaret's hands trembled, but then, as always, she regained her mask. She laughed, brittle and sharp. Such drama. You've always had a flair for theatrics, Mother, but I saw it. The fear flickering behind her eyes. From that day forward, Margaret never tried again. The gas remained off, the stairs were safe, and no rugs were left loose. But her hatred did not fade. It simmered, burning hotter with every smile she forced across her lips. And dear listener, let me tell you this. Sometimes silence is more dangerous than open attack. I lived every day with the knowledge that she was waiting for me to slip, to grow too tired, too careless, which is why I prepared the second half of my plan. For months, I had spoken vaguely of a secret inheritance, of arrangements no one knew. Margaret, curious as a crow, began snooping, rifling drawers, listening at doors, even questioning Emily. I wanted her curiosity inflamed. Then, one evening, I left a small locked box in my wardrobe, conspicuously placed, as though I had carelessly forgotten to hide it. Inside, beneath a false lid, was a single note, "Not here. Ask the bank." I knew Margaret would find it. And she did. The very next morning, I watched her leave the house early, dressed in her best coat, her steps brisk. She thought she was clever, but I was already 2 steps ahead. For at the bank, she discovered nothing. My accounts were sealed, my solicitor instructed not to reveal a word unless I was present. She returned home, her cheeks flushed with fury, her eyes sharp as knives. She burst into the drawing room. "Where is it?" she hissed, forgetting even Charles was there. "Where is what, dear?" I asked innocently, my knitting needles clicking. "The money," she spat. "The inheritance. The fortune you hide. Where is it?" Charles sat up, startled. "Margaret," but she ignored him. She loomed over me, her hands trembling. "You can't take it with you, old woman. Tell me where it is, or—" I set down my knitting slowly and looked her dead in the eye. "Or what, Margaret? Finish your sentence," she faltered. For a moment, she looked like a cornered fox, her cunning failing her. And then Emily, sweet Emily, looked up from her dolls and said in her innocent little voice, "Mummy, why are you shouting at Gran?" Silence fell. Margaret's face turned crimson. She muttered something about being tired, then stormed upstairs, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. Charles stared at me, bewildered. "Mother, is there really money?" I smiled faintly. "Oh yes, my boy, more than you can imagine, but it will go only to those who prove worthy." And so far, I let the words hang, my meaning clear. Dear listener, can you feel the fire in that room? The tension thick as smoke, the desperation in Margaret's eyes. Tell me, if you were in my place, would you have revealed the truth then, or kept the secret burning? A torch against the darkness. Comment your thoughts, because I promise you, the real revelation was yet to come. For when the day finally arrived to unveil my fortune, it left them not just speechless, but shattered. And that, dear listener, is where the true climax of this tale begins. So please, if you've stayed with me through these twists and shadows, press like so others may hear this story too. Share it so greed's poison is never forgotten. And subscribe to join me for the final act, where the truth of my secret bank account will finally shake the walls of this house. The morning of reckoning came on a day that seemed, at first, ordinary. Pale winter sunlight slanted through the frosted windows. The kettle whistled faintly on the stove, and Emily's laughter echoed faintly as she played with her dolls on the rug. To anyone else, it might have looked like a peaceful English morning, but inside me, a storm brewed, for I had decided this was the day I would reveal the truth. For weeks, Margaret had grown more restless, her eyes darting, her words clipped. She had searched the house from cellar to attic, convinced that somewhere I'd hidden the key to my fortune. I had allowed her to stew in that desperation, to let it eat at her until her patience frayed, because only then would the revelation strike with its full force. I waited until Charles returned from town, his coat dusted with snowflakes, his mood as heavy as the grey sky. Margaret hovered like a vulture, asking too quickly about his errands, her voice strained with a hunger she could no longer disguise. "Sit," I said softly, my cane tapping against the hearth. Both of you, there is something you must hear. Charles looked wary, Margaret suspicious, but they obeyed. Emily scurried over too, her little hands clutching her doll, her wide eyes curious. I smiled at her gently. Yes, she would hear this as well, for she deserved the truth more than anyone. Do you remember, I began, my voice slow and steady, how you mocked me, Margaret, how you laughed at my slippers, my shawls, my trembling hands, how you whispered to Charles that I was nothing but a burden. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Charles muttered, Mother, must we? Yes, I said firmly. You must hear it all, because what you did not know, what none of you knew, is that while you treated me like a withered shadow, I carried within me a secret that could change everything. I let the silence stretch, the fire snapping in the grate. Then I continued. After your father passed, I was left with little more than this house and a small pension. But I had lived through war, through ration books, through days when every penny mattered. I knew how to make something out of nothing. And so, quietly I began to invest. Small sums at first, government bonds, then property shares, later, a small inheritance from my sister, wisely placed in foreign accounts. I never spoke of it, for greed has ears, and even walls can betray you. Charles blinked. Margaret's lips parted in disbelief. You invested? Charles asked hoarsely. Oh yes, I said with a faint smile, and I was good at it. Patient, watchful, cautious, while you were mocking my knitting and my old-fashioned ways. I was building something none of you suspected. I reached into my pocket and withdrew a small envelope, sealed in red wax. In here, I whispered, is the proof, account numbers, balances, properties you've never set foot in. Margaret, while you were scheming to snuff me out, I was securing a future for Emily. Margaret's face drained of colour. For Emily, she croaked. Yes, I said, my voice hardening. Every penny, every share, every brick of it belongs to her. Not to you, not to Charles, to Emily alone. And I made sure of it legally. My solicitor has copies of every document. Nothing can be touched without my consent. And when I'm gone, it transfers straight to her name. A gasp escaped Margaret's throat. She clutched the arm of the chair, her knuckles white. Charles stared at me, stunned, his glass of brandy forgotten in his hand. You mean, he stammered, Emily will be… Yes, I said, interrupting. She will never want for anything. Her schooling, her home, her freedom, all secured. She will not live under the shadow of poverty or dependence. She will be free. Margaret's composure shattered. She shot to her feet, her voice shrill. This is madness. You can't leave it all to a child. Charles is your son. He deserves it. I deserve it after all Deserve? I thundered, slamming my cane on the floor. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Emily flinched, clutching her doll tighter. You speak of deserve, Margaret? You who tried to drive me to my death. You who poisoned this house with your cruelty. You will not see a single shilling of it. Her mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping on land. For once, she had no words. Charles tried to intervene, his voice cracking. Mother, please, be reasonable. I turned to him sharply. Do not plead with me, Charles. You were my son, my pride, but you stood by while she mocked me, while she nearly killed me. Your silence was betrayal enough. You may receive some provision. I am not without mercy. But the true fortune, the heart of it, belongs to Emily. Emily, sweet child, looked up at me with innocent confusion. Gran, does that mean I'm rich? Tears stung my eyes. I bent down, cupping her little face in my hands. Yes, my darling. But more than that, it means you are safe. No one can take your future from you. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift from my chest. The secret was no longer mine alone to bear. It was out, spoken, undeniable. Margaret, however, trembled like a storm about to break. Her face twisted, red with fury, her eyes blazing with something almost inhuman. You old witch, she spat. You'll regret this. You'll regret crossing me. I rose slowly, leaning on my cane, my voice as cold as winter. No, Margaret, it is you who will regret underestimating me. Dear listener, can you feel the fire in this room? Can you see Margaret's rage boiling over? The stunned betrayal in Charles's eyes? The innocence in little Emily's face as the world around her shifted forever? If you can, then let me ask, what would you have done standing in my place? Would you have given Charles a second chance? Would you have shown Margaret mercy? Or would you, like me, have chosen to protect the only innocent soul in the room? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know if I chose rightly. And please, if my story has gripped your heart, do not leave me here alone in the shadows. Like this tale, share it with others, so greed's poison may be exposed, and subscribe to hear the final act. For the battle was not over. No, it was only beginning. For when Margaret realized she could not inherit, she grew more dangerous than ever. And what came next nearly tore the house apart. The silence after my revelation was heavy enough to choke the air itself. Margaret stood trembling, her chest rising and falling like a bellows, her eyes fixed on me with a hatred so sharp, I swear it could have cut glass. Charles sat slack-jawed, unable to process the weight of what I had revealed, and little Emily, bless her, looked between us with wide, confused eyes, her doll clasped to her chest like a shield. I thought for a moment Margaret might crumble, that she might retreat upstairs, slam a door, and weep her bitterness into a pillow. But no, Margaret was not the kind to yield. Her pride would not allow it. You think you've won, old woman, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. But you haven't. You've humiliated me, turned my own husband against me, and given everything to that child. She jabbed a finger toward Emily, who shrank back, frightened, as if I were nothing. Do you think I'll sit here quietly and watch you ruin my life? I stood tall, my cane steady in my hand. I think, I said calmly, that you have already ruined your own life. Greed does that. Hatred does that. All I did was show you the mirror. Her face twisted, and then, with a suddenness that froze my heart, she lunged toward me. Charles leapt to his feet, shouting her name. But Margaret was faster. Her hands grabbed my cane, wrenching it from my grasp. For an instant, I thought she might strike me with it, beat me down in front of my own granddaughter. But instead, she threw it across the room, her voice shrill with rage. You won't live to see her grow, she screamed. I'll make sure of it, Emily screamed, clutching my skirts. Charles tried to restrain her, grabbing her arms, but Margaret struggled like a madwoman, her nails clawing, her hair disheveled. I had never seen such fury, not even in the darkest days of the Blitz, when desperation drove people to madness. This was worse. This was personal, and in that moment, something inside me broke free. Fear fled. Age vanished. I was not a frail grandmother anymore. I was a mother, a protector, a woman who had endured decades of hardship and would not surrender now. I raised my voice, louder than the storm that raged in her. Enough! The word cracked like thunder. Even Margaret froze, if only for a heartbeat. I stepped forward, my body trembling, but my spirit aflame. You may mock me, you may try to kill me, but you will never, never take my soul. I built this fortune with my hands, my patience, my sacrifice. And I will see it guard Emily long after you are dust in the ground. Charles finally dragged her back, pinning her against the wall. She fought like a wildcat, spitting curses, but his strength overpowered her. His face was pale, streaked with sweat. Margaret, stop! For God's sake, stop! She sagged at last, panting, her eyes still locked on me with loathing. You'll regret this, she whispered, You'll regret crossing me. I picked up my cane from where it had fallen, steadying myself. My voice was calm, but iron lay beneath it. No, Margaret, it is you who will regret underestimating me. Because you see, I thought of everything. I turned then to Charles. My poor foolish boy. Do you want to know the final twist, my son? The one that changes everything? He stared at me bewildered. Margaret's chest heaved. Her face damp with tears of fury. Not only is the fortune secured for Emily, I said, my voice soft but firm, but it is protected from you both. I created a trust, one that cannot be broken, one that bypasses every greedy hand in this house. Margaret, you will never touch a penny of it. And Charles, my boy, you will have only what I willed you, nothing more. The solicitor holds the papers. The law holds the key. Nothing you do can undo it. The words dropped like stones in the silence. Charles sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Margaret's mouth opened in a silent scream. Her rage so great it robbed her of voice. Emily clung to me, her little body trembling, whispering, "Gran, I'm scared." I stroked her hair. "Don't be, love. The storm has passed. You're safe now." And I meant it. For in that moment, I knew the battle was over. Not because Margaret accepted defeat. Oh no, she never would. But because the truth was unshakable. I had secured Emily's future, wrapped it in iron chains that no spiteful hand could break. Later that night, the house was eerily quiet. Margaret locked herself in her room. Charles drank himself into a stupor. Emily slept beside me, her tiny hand curled in mine. I lay awake, staring into the dark, my heart heavy but resolute. I had lost much. The love of my son, the peace of my old age. But I had gained something greater. The knowledge that I had fought back, that I had not been cowed, that I had outwitted the very greed that sought to consume me. Dear listener, as I sit here telling you this tale, the fire casting shadows on the walls, I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven Charles? Would you have tried to heal Margaret's poisoned heart? Or would you, like me, have chosen to protect the innocent above all else? Comment your thoughts, for I read them closely, and your words give me strength. And please, if my story has moved you, do not keep it locked away like my fortune. Like this video, share it with others so that greed's mask may be torn off, and subscribe to walk with me through the rest of my tales, because this is not the end. No, dear listener, this was only one battle, the war of families, of greed, of love and betrayal. That war never ends. And as long as I draw breath, I will be here to tell you every chapter. So stay with me. The darkest secrets are yet to come. The days that followed my revelation were quieter on the surface. But underneath, the house throbbed with tension, like a wound that would not heal. Margaret kept to her room for long stretches, emerging only when necessary. Her lips pressed tight, her eyes filled with something that was no longer simple anger, but obsession. Charles drifted through the halls like a ghost, a bottle always within reach, torn between his loyalty to his wife and the shame of failing his mother. And me? I waited, because I knew Margaret too well. That woman was not built for surrender. She was like ivy. Tear it down, cut it back, and still it would find a way to cling, to grow, to choke whatever it touched. It was Emily who gave me the first warning. One evening, as I was brushing her hair by the fire, she whispered, "Gran, I heard Mummy talking to someone last night." "Someone?" I asked, my heart tightening. She nodded gravely. "A man. I couldn't see him, but they were in the kitchen." She was whispering, but I heard her say your name. A chill crawled up my spine. Margaret had allies then. Perhaps someone from town. Perhaps worse. I kissed Emily's forehead and told her not to worry. But inside, I was already steeling myself. I had outplayed Margaret before, but now she was growing desperate, reckless. Desperation makes people dangerous. The next morning, I discovered something chilling. On the table by the door was a small vial, its cork stopper loose. A bitter smell lingered in the air. I knew that smell. Rat poison. I stared at it for a long moment, my cane trembling in my grip. Then I heard Margaret's voice behind me, falsely sweet. "Careful, Mother. Don't touch that. Nasty stuff. We've had vermin in the pantry, you know." I turned, meeting her gaze. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She smiled, that cold, mocking smile, and then swept past me into the drawing room. She thought I would falter. She thought fear would silence me. But oh dear listener, she underestimated me once again. That afternoon, I made a decision. I would not wait for her next attempt. I would end this once and for all. I sent Emily out with Miriam, the maid, under the pretense of Christmas shopping. I wanted her far from the storm I knew was coming. Then I prepared the stage. I brewed tea, setting out 2 cups on the tray, and called Margaret into the drawing room. She came reluctantly, suspicion etched on her face. "What is this?" she asked. "A truce," I said softly, pouring the tea. "Sit, Margaret. Let us talk like women, not enemies." She hesitated, then lowered herself into the chair opposite me. Her eyes darted to the cups. I saw the flicker of thought, the same idea I had when I smelled the vial of poison. "Drink," I urged, sliding her a cup. She picked it up, turning it slowly in her hands. "Why the sudden kindness?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Because I am tired," I admitted. Tired of fighting, tired of watching this house rot with bitterness. Let us be honest with each other, just this once. She studied me for a long moment, then took a sip. I did the same. The tea was bitter, not from poison, but from the truth I was about to unleash. "Margaret," I said quietly, "you think I hate you, but hate is too heavy for these old bones. No, what I feel is pity. Pity that you cannot see beyond your greed. Pity that you will never know the joy of giving. Only the hunger of taking." Her eyes narrowed. "Spare me your sermons." "Very well," I said. "Then let us talk of practical matters. You see, I knew you would never stop. That is why I prepared one last safeguard, a second trust. Should anything happen to me, anything at all, the authorities will open an investigation. Every whisper of poison, every loose stare, every cruel word will come to light. And you, Margaret, will be the first they question." Her teacup froze, midway to her lips. "Yes," I said, leaning forward. "I kept records, letters, even Emily's innocent words about the gas, the stairs, the poison. They will all be evidence. You think you can rid yourself of me? No, if I fall, you fall with me." Her face drained of color. For the first time, I saw not rage, but fear. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Oh, I would," I replied softly. "Because I am old, yes, frail perhaps, but I am not powerless. I have lived long enough to know how to fight battles, not with fists, but with foresight. And foresight is a sharper blade than any knife you could wield." Silence stretched between us. The fire crackled, the clock ticked, and Margaret, proud, cruel Margaret, lowered her cup. "You've trapped me," she whispered, her voice hollow. I nodded. "Yes, and now you must choose. Live here in civility or leave. But if you raise your hand against me again, it will be the last move you make." She rose abruptly, her chair scraping the floor, her face twisted with fury and despair. Without another word, she stormed upstairs, her footsteps echoing like thunder. I sat there for a long time, staring into the fire, my heart pounding. I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. But the tide had turned. Margaret had felt the trap close around her. And that, dear listener, is a kind of victory. Later, Emily returned, her cheeks rosy from the cold, her arms full of sweets. She ran to me, throwing her little arms around my neck. "Gran, did Mummy behave while I was gone?" I laughed softly, though my heart was still heavy. For now, darling, for now. And as I held her close, I thought of the fortune locked away, the documents safe in the solicitor's hands, the future I had carved out of shadows and secrets. But I also thought of Margaret upstairs, her pride bleeding, her rage simmering. She was not finished. No, the storm was only gathering, and I wondered, when it broke, would this house survive it? Dear listener, what do you think? Have I done enough to protect Emily? Or is Margaret's hatred too strong, too dangerous, to ever be caged? Tell me in the comments, for your wisdom matters more than you know. And if this tale has gripped your soul, like it grips mine as I relive it, press like so others may hear it. Share it so no family suffers the same poison. And subscribe, for the endgame is near, because Margaret's last move would be the deadliest yet. The house did not sleep that night, or perhaps it was only me who could not. I lay awake in my bed, every creak of the old timbers sounding like footsteps outside my door, every rush of wind against the windows a whisper of ill intent. I had thought my warning would cage Margaret, but caged beasts often become more dangerous. Just after midnight I heard it, a faint scrape against the floorboards in the corridor. Slow, deliberate, cautious. My heart clenched. I reached for my cane, sitting upright, listening. The sound stopped outside my door, a pause. Then, the softest rattle of the doorknob. I rose, my knees trembling, but my will sharp. Before she could force her way in, I pulled the door wide. There she stood, pale as a ghost in her nightgown, her hands still on the knob, her eyes wild with something between fury and madness. "What are you doing, Margaret?" I asked, my voice low. She flinched, but quickly masked it with a sneer. "Checking on you, Mother. You're old, frail. I worried you might slip away in your sleep." I held her gaze. "You mean you hoped I would?" Her lips curled into a cruel smile. "And if you did, who would question it? An old woman, gone quietly in the night, perfectly natural. Except," I said softly, "for the records I've left behind. Remember them, Margaret." Her smile faltered, but only for a second. She leaned closer, her voice a venomous hiss. "You think you've outwitted me, but you've only bought yourself time. Time runs out, Mother, even for you." And with that, she turned sharply and vanished down the corridor, her shadow swallowed by the dark. I shut my door, bolted it, and sat down heavily on the bed. She was unraveling, and when people unravel, they do not care whom they drag down with them. The next day, I pretended nothing had happened. I smiled at Emily, read with her by the fire, even shared tea with Charles, who seemed more broken than ever. But all the while, my mind worked furiously. Margaret would strike again, and soon. It came 2 evenings later. The storm outside rattled the windows, rain lashed the panes, and thunder rolled across the moors. We dined together, the 4 of us, though the atmosphere was tense, brittle, ready to snap. Halfway through the meal, Margaret rose suddenly. "I've baked a pudding," she announced, her tone falsely cheerful. "It is a special treat." My blood ran cold. I watched her carry it in from the kitchen, the rich scent filling the room. She cut generous portions, placing one before me with a flourish. "Go on, Mother," she urged. "You'll find it delicious." I stared at the pudding. The surface gleamed too brightly, the sauce too thick. And then, a faint bitter tang reached my nose. Not sugar, not spice, something else. I lifted my fork slowly, but instead of eating, I turned to Emily. "Darling," I said softly, "why don't you fetch the tin soldier you left in the drawing room? Quickly now!" She nodded, hopping down from her chair, her curls bouncing as she skipped out of the room. Only when she was gone did I set down my fork. "No, Margaret," I said firmly. "Not this time." She froze. "What do you mean?" "You know very well what I mean," I replied, my eyes never leaving hers. "You would poison me at my own table, in front of my granddaughter." Her face twisted, rage breaking through her mask. "Why won't you just die?" she screamed, slamming her fists against the table. "You cling to life like a parasite. You've ruined everything. The money, the house, Charles." "Enough!" Charles roared, surging to his feet, his face flushed with wine and shame. "Margaret, stop this madness!" But she whirled on him, her eyes blazing. "Madness? You call me mad when your mother has humiliated us. She controls us like puppets, Charles, and you stand there like a coward." Her words struck him like blows. He staggered back, his shoulders slumping, tears brimming in his eyes. And in that moment, I knew the truth. Charles was lost, broken beyond repair by years of Margaret's poison, not in food, but in spirit. It was Emily I had to save. I stood, my cane firm beneath me. "Margaret," I said, my voice cold and clear, "this ends tonight. You may despise me, you may wish me dead, but you will not touch that child. Do you understand?" She laughed bitterly. "And what will you do, old woman? Beat me with your cane. Call the police. They'll never believe you. I'll tell them you're senile, confused, seeing ghosts where there are none." I smiled faintly. "Oh, but they'll believe Emily. Children speak truth in ways adults cannot, and I've already ensured her words will be heard." Her laughter faltered. "You see," I continued, "last week, I asked Emily to tell Mr. Howard, my solicitor, everything she had seen, every quarrel, every threat, every whisper. He wrote it all down, signed, witnessed. If anything happens to me, Margaret, it will be your undoing." For the first time, true terror filled her eyes. And then, in a flash of madness, she lunged. I stumbled back, her hands clawing at me, her nails scraping my skin. Charles shouted, grabbing her arm, but she struck him across the face, sending him reeling. Plates shattered, the table overturned, the storm outside roaring in harmony with the chaos inside. Just then, Emily's voice rang out from the doorway. "Gran!" Margaret froze, her chest heaving, her hair wild, her eyes wide. She turned slowly, seeing her daughter standing there, clutching the tin soldier, her small face pale with horror. "Mummy, what are you doing?" Emily whispered. Silence fell. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath. Margaret's hands dropped to her sides. Her lips trembled, and for one fleeting moment, I saw something human in her eyes. Shame, perhaps, or the faintest flicker of regret. She turned and fled, out of the dining room, up the stairs, her footsteps pounding like drums. A door slammed. We stood there, the three of us, me, Charles, and little Emily, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been a family. Later that night, I found Margaret's room empty, her clothes gone, her jewelry box overturned. She had fled into the storm, leaving behind nothing but silence. Charles sat in the drawing room, his face buried in his hands, weeping like a child. Emily curled against me, trembling, her soldier clutched tight in her hand. And I knew at last, it was over. Margaret was gone. The house was scarred, yes. The wound she left behind would never fully heal. But Emily was safe. My secret bank account, my foresight, my fight. It had all been for her, and as the storm faded into dawn, I whispered a prayer of gratitude, not for myself, but for the child who would inherit not just my fortune, but my strength. Dear listener, perhaps you wonder if I was cruel, if I should have shown Margaret mercy. But mercy for the merciless is but fuel for their fire. I did what I had to, for Emily, for love. And so I ask you now, do you believe I was right? Or should I have forgiven Margaret, even at the risk of all we held dear? Tell me in the comments, for your voices are my company in these lonely hours. And if my story has gripped you, if you felt the storm raging in your heart as it raged in mine, then please, like this tale, share it so others may hear and subscribe, for there are more truths yet to be told. Because though Margaret has gone, her shadow still lingers, and sometimes in the dead of night, I wonder if I truly won, or if the battle has only just begun. The morning after Margaret vanished, the house felt both lighter and heavier all at once. Lighter because her footsteps no longer echoed with malice. Her voice no longer dripped venom into the walls. Yet heavier because absence carries its own weight. The weight of unfinished battles, of questions left behind, of shadows that cling to corners, even when the source is gone. Emily was the first to stir. She padded into my room in her little nightgown, her hair tangled from sleep, her tin soldier still clutched in her tiny hand. "Gran," she whispered, climbing onto the bed beside me. "Is Mummy coming back?" I kissed her forehead, my heart aching. "I don't know, darling, but whatever happens, you and I will be all right. Do you trust me?" She nodded solemnly. "Always." Those words were like a balm. They reminded me why I had fought so hard, why I had endured Margaret's cruelty, why I had hidden my fortune so carefully. Not for myself, but for her. Charles, however, was another story. He emerged late, his face ashen, his eyes hollow. He said little as he poured himself a drink, though the sun had barely risen. He sat in the drawing room all day, staring into the fire as though searching for answers in the flames. I watched him from the doorway, my heart heavy. He was my son, my only child, and yet he felt further from me than ever. Margaret had twisted him, drained him, broken him. Now that she was gone, I wondered if he would ever find his way back, or if he would remain lost in the fog she left behind. By evening the questions began. A knock at the door revealed 2 constables, their boots slick with rain. They asked about Margaret's disappearance, about the storm, about whether she had quarrelled with us before leaving. I told them the truth, though not all of it. I said she had been unhappy, restless, prone to arguments. I said she had left abruptly in the night, taking her belongings with her. I did not mention the pudding, the poison, the claw marks she had left on my arms. Some truths, dear listener, would only paint me as a hysterical old woman in their eyes. They nodded, made their notes, and left. But I saw suspicion in their glances, the same suspicion the villagers had always harboured about our family. Too much wealth, too many secrets, too many whispers. In the days that followed, life fell into a strange rhythm. Emily returned to her lessons. Miriam kept the house in order, and I tended to my roses in the frostbitten garden. Yet always, I felt Margaret's absence like a spectre. Was she out there, plotting her return? Or had the storm claimed her, her body lying somewhere in the marshes, swallowed by the earth? It was a week later when the first letter arrived. I found it on the hall table one morning, the handwriting unmistakable. Sharp, slanted, angry strokes. Margaret's hand. My stomach twisted as I opened it. "Mother," it read, "you think you've won. You think your clever schemes and your wretched solicitor make you untouchable. But I am not gone. I am watching. And when the time is right, I will return. Not for you, but for what you've stolen from me. That child is mine, and the fortune should be mine. You cannot keep them from me forever." My hands trembled as I folded the letter, slipping it into my pocket before Emily could see. So she was alive. And worse, she was still watching. That night, I locked every window, bolted every door. I checked on Emily twice, thrice, making sure she slept soundly. Yet even as I stood by her bedside, I felt eyes on me, eyes peering through the cracks of the old house, eyes filled with hatred. It was then I decided. I could no longer keep everything within these crumbling walls. The time had come to reveal the existence of my secret bank account. Not the details, not yet, but enough to ensure Emily's future was beyond Margaret's reach. The next morning, I called for Mr. Howard. He came promptly, his spectacles fogged from the cold, his leather case clutched under his arm, in the drawing room, with the fire crackling between us. I told him of Margaret's disappearance, of the letter, of my fears. He listened intently, nodding, his pen scratching across his notebook. Then I revealed it. The account I had built over decades. The fortune, hidden not in the walls of the house, but in the vaults of the bank. Protected by trusts, locked by signatures, immune to the grasping hands of my daughter-in-law. Emily must never know want, I said firmly. When I am gone, she is to inherit everything. Not Charles, not Margaret, not anyone else. Only Emily. Mr. Howard adjusted his spectacles, his eyes wide. Madam, this is no small sum. You understand the power this gives her? I nodded. I do, and I trust her heart more than I have ever trusted theirs. We signed the documents, sealed the instructions, and with each stroke of the pen, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. But as I closed the folder, a chill swept through me, because I knew Margaret would not stop until she had found out, and when she discovered just how vast the fortune truly was. Her fury would be unimaginable. That night, as the wind howled outside, I sat by the fire with Emily curled against me. I told her stories of when I was a girl, of winters spent skating on frozen ponds, of springtime dances in fields of bluebells, of summers filled with laughter and song. She listened with wide eyes, her little hand resting over mine. Gran, she whispered, will you always be here to tell me stories? Tears stung my eyes. I kissed her hair. As long as I can, my darling, and when I cannot, my stories will live on with you. But inside, I wondered, would I live long enough to protect her from the storm that was still coming? Dear listener, do you feel it too? The dread, the waiting, the knowledge that peace is only a pause between battles. Tell me in the comments if you believe Margaret is gone for good, or if she lurks still in the shadows, and if you wish to hear how this tale unfolds, the secret, the betrayals, the final reckoning, then like, share, and subscribe. For only together can we face what lies ahead, because the truth is, Margaret's letter was only the beginning, and the next blow would strike closer to home than I ever imagined. The second letter arrived on a cold Sunday morning, slipped not through the post, but under the door, as though placed there by a hidden hand in the night. I found it while stirring the fire, the crackle of flames nearly drowning out the whisper of parchment against stone. I picked it up with trembling fingers, knowing before I opened it who it was from. Mother, it read, you have taken what is mine. You sit there in your crumbling throne of wood and fire, thinking yourself clever, thinking your secrets safe. But I know about the account. I know about the fortune. And soon, the world will know too. When I return, there will be no hiding. The girl will be mine, and your precious money will build the life I deserve. My knees weakened, and I gripped the mantle for strength. She knew. Somehow, through whispers, or spies, or sheer cunning, Margaret had learned of the fortune. The very weapon I had created to protect Emily had now become the target of Margaret's fury. I could no longer wait. I had to end it. That afternoon I sent for Charles. He came reluctantly, his face haggard, his spirit weighed down by guilt. What is it, Mother? He asked, his voice dull. I handed him the letters. He read them, his eyes widening, his lips trembling. She's alive? Yes, I said firmly. And she's watching us, waiting. Charles, you must understand. She will never stop. Not until she has destroyed everything, including Emily. He sank into the chair, his hands over his face. I never wanted this. I only wanted peace. Then help me, I said softly, but with steel in my tone. Help me end it. For a long time he was silent. Then, at last, he nodded. That night, we set our trap. I wrote a letter of my own, sealed with my hand, and left it in plain sight on the hall table, as though carelessly forgotten. Inside, It spoke of a meeting with Mr. Howard the next day to finalize the transfer of the account into Emily's name. I knew Margaret's spies would see it. I knew she would come, and she did. It was near midnight when the window latch clicked in the drawing room. I sat in the shadows by the fire, my cane across my knees. Emily safely asleep upstairs, Charles waiting in the corridor. The window opened, and Margaret slipped inside. She looked gaunt, her eyes sunken, her hair wild, her clothes damp from the mist outside. Yet her gaze burned with the same fury, the same hunger. She spotted the letter on the table and snatched it up, scanning it quickly. A cruel smile spread across her face. "That child will not live to see a penny," she hissed. "I'll make sure of it." I stepped forward from the shadows. "No, Margaret, you won't," she spun, her eyes blazing. "You?" "Yes," I said, standing tall despite the trembling in my bones. "Me, the old woman you thought weak, helpless, easy to crush. But I am stronger than you ever imagined, Margaret, because my strength does not come from greed, but from love." She snarled and lunged at me, but before she reached, Charles burst in, blocking her path. "Enough, Margaret," he cried. "It ends tonight." She froze, staring at him in shock. "You?" she spat. "You dare defy me. I've defied myself for too long," he said, his voice shaking. "I let you twist me, break me, but no more. You will not touch my mother. You will not touch Emily." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Disbelief, betrayal. Then rage consumed her once more. She screamed and shoved him aside, rushing toward me, her hands outstretched. But I was ready. I lifted my cane, striking it hard against the floor. The sound echoed like thunder, and behind her, the constable stepped into the room, summoned earlier by Charles and hidden in the shadows. Margaret froze, realizing too late. They seized her, her screams filling the room, curses pouring from her lips like venom. "You'll regret this, both of you. That money is mine. Mine." They dragged her out into the night, her voice fading into the darkness until only silence remained. I sank into the chair, trembling, tears streaming down my cheeks. Charles knelt beside me, his hand covering mine. "I'm sorry, Mother," he whispered, "for everything." I cupped his cheek, my heart breaking and mending all at once. "It is not too late, Charles. Not if you choose better now." The days that followed were quiet. Margaret was taken away, her fate sealed by her own letters, her threats, her crimes. The villagers gossiped, of course. They always did. But for the first time, their whispers carried no sting, for they saw the truth now. I was not the frail, foolish old woman they mocked, but a survivor who had outwitted cruelty with wisdom. And Emily, sweet Emily, she flourished. She laughed more freely, slept more soundly, held my hand with joy instead of fear. She did not fully understand what had happened, nor did I wish her to. Childhood should be a sanctuary, not a battlefield. As for Charles, he began to heal, slowly, painfully, but surely. He put down the bottle more often, joined Emily for walks, even tended the roses with me in the morning frost. And me? I sat by the fire, day after day, telling my stories, not just of my childhood, but of this house, this family, this long bitter war we had fought. Because stories, dear listener, are more than words. They are warnings. They are shields. They are torches in the dark. And now, as I tell you mine, I ask only this. Do not underestimate the old, the frail, the forgotten. For we carry secrets, strength, and love that can outlast even the fiercest storms. So if my tale has moved you, if you felt my fear, my sorrow, my triumph, then let me know. Comment with your thoughts. Share this story so others may learn. Like it so it may reach those in need. And subscribe so you will never miss the truths I have yet to share. For though Margaret is gone and the house is quiet, the world beyond these walls still trembles with greed and cruelty. And perhaps, one day, my story will give strength to another who is mocked, another who is underestimated, another who must rise to protect what they love. I am old, yes, but I am not weak, and though they mocked me for it, in the end, my secret bank account left them speechless.